So in this video, I'd like to explain what emotions are, or more broadly, how our brain processes information that isn't just logical or conscious. Because the truth is, we all know we constantly are having emotional reactions to things, and I believe it's really important to know what that's based on. But for a moment, let's forget about emotion and just talk about the brain, because the brain has more than one way of processing information. Now, rationality or logic is the one we're most familiar with because it's the most conscious and purposeful. We really love rationality because we have control over it. It allows us to solve new and complex problems. Plus, logic is less reflexive and reactive, so it's our most flexible system. So that being said, I'd like to make the case today that the non-logical ways we process information are just as valid and perhaps even more important for our survival. We colloquially call these reactions our emotional reactions. And while we tend to think of them as illogical, I'd like to make the case that they're not. I mean, they may be non-logical, they're not logically derived, but they're based on something that is just as smart. And that is lived experience. For these parts of the brain, the proof is in the pudding, which is totally valid. This is a really robust system that allows us to move through the world without dying. I learn, hey, I did this and I got hurt, so I'm not going to do that again. I may not know the logical reason I got hurt. In fact, these parts may not care about logic or reasoning at all. They just know this happened and this was the outcome. So I'm going to learn through my experience not to do that again or to do more of this other thing that seemed to produce a good outcome. So through millions of repetitions of experience, the brain learns what to associate with what. This to a bad outcome. It's kind of like in classical conditioning we learned in school where the dog learns to associate the bell with the arrival of food. So now the bell means the arrival of food. There's no rational reason that a bell should mean food, or that perhaps asking for what I need should mean getting hurt. But if that's what we see happen in our lived experience, our brain will hook that up into a pattern, not only of what to expect, like bell and food, but also what to do next. Like, how do I need to adapt or respond to the situation to get the best outcome? So I have a sensory input, my brain learns what's about to happen next, and it also learns just through trial and error, what should I do in that situation? So a little map of reality is set up, which we call a schema, that takes the sensory input, what I expect is going to happen next, and how I've learned through conditioning, basically, through creating a map of reality that's non-conscious, that lives in the deeper parts of our brain, what to do next. And these associations, these networks of associations, can be quite complex. So perhaps asking for what I need is associated with getting hurt. To some degree, just people might be associated to getting hurt, or the smell of the person that hurt me the most might be associated with getting hurt. And it's really important that our brain makes these connections and links up reality in this way because it is a very efficient way of predicting and preparing for life. The truth is, as much as we love rationality, it takes so much time and energy to come to a rational, logical conclusion and decision. I think of rationality like processing information through a straw. It takes specific pieces of information and then works them with a lot of effort and purposeful attention. Whereas the non-logical ways our brain works, it's like processing an ocean's amount of information quickly and efficiently. And this is really important because when these schemas, these little maps of reality are hooked up, then as soon as something happens, everything is immediately laid out for us. There's a sensory input, we know what to expect, how to respond, how to even shift our bodies to do the actions we are preparing to do. So sensory input and boom, everything is laid out. That's a very efficient system that allows us, particularly in moments of danger, to respond effectively. So the other beautiful thing about these schemas is that they can work in the background non-consciously. Can you imagine if we had to be consciously aware of every decision or information processing that our brain was doing? Even things like driving to work are partly possible because we can automate so much of that. I mean, picture if you had to drive to work, if you had to make every turn and look over your shoulder because you rationally realized that was the best idea. versus just knowing through experience and not even having to think about it. I know I've had moments where I've driven to work and I could barely remember even getting there because it was so easy for my brain to do that. I didn't even have to be aware of everything I was doing, which, while I know we love awareness and being in the present moment and everything, actually that would be exhausting to have to show up to every moment, like learning fresh, figuring out as if for the first time what to do. And that is true particularly for moments of danger. Why? Because in moments of danger, it's important we respond quickly. We don't want to overthink our movement, going into fight or flight, protecting ourselves. So especially in moments of danger, these more implicit, what you might call implicit, they're kind of in the background systems through experiential learning and through our schemas of what to expect and how to respond. That part tends to kick in more when we feel threatened or even just under stress, which is why when we're under stress, it can feel like swimming upstream to try to slow down and think through it and be rational, which I realize is really frustrating. It's really frustrating when we feel either highly stressed or highly emotional, how it can feel like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because again, the less conscious and purposeful parts of our brain are wanting to take over. That being said, this is what has helped us survive as a species. So it's not that these processes are bad, it's just to learn how to interface with them in a way that we can understand how we are wired and adjust it to be truly adaptive. What I think is fascinating, therefore, when we track our body and our emotional response, it's like a little window where we can peek into how the less conscious parts of our brain are making sense of this moment. And it even gives us some idea of how does this moment compare to our past or prime our brain in terms of how it believes it needs to embody this moment. So I find that really fascinating, especially for people who are, have high emotional intelligence or an emotional awareness, that actually in itself can be some data into just how our system is set up. What is the world that we unconsciously expect to be coming toward us and have learned that we need to respond to in certain ways? So I hope this explanation of our emotional reactions makes some sense. I think it's just so important that we understand some of the basic systems within our mind, because I believe when we understand something, it's harder to judge it. If we can appreciate that our emotional issues rest on deeply learned associations and expectations of how the world works, then we can see that our emotional issues to a degree really make sense. Although the fact that our emotional issues make sense is the topic for the next video. So let's go there next.